The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Oh, I see. Okay, so now you are added as a presenter, so now you can speak to the group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we're just in practice mode right now. I will start the webinar probably in 15 minutes. So like you start the webinar and sort of that opens the webinar, meaning people can sign into it. But
Okay, great.
then it doesn't start until we actually start the broadcast, which I'll
Okay.
do like right before one.
Okay, great.
So how does the screen look? Can you see it okay?
Yeah, it's full screen.
Okay.
It says being special with social media.
Good.
Great.
Go to webinar logistics.
Yes.
Okay, great. Now I have a few videos that I want to show, so let's just test those out and see for you if they work. So let's start with this one. Don't maybe a selfie.
Yes, I can see the video.
You saw that?
It's paused
Yeah, I
now.
paused it, but a video
Okay,
came
yeah.
up and you could hear it.
So I don't have speakers in my computer right now,
Oh, but you should
so I
hear
can't
it
test that.
through the phone though.
I don't hear it through the phone.
Oh, drag. Let me just try again and see if I can play the audio controls, and I'll check in with you in a few seconds.
Sure.
So you don't hear that music coming through the phone?
No.
Oh, that's so frustrating. Okay, let me try this other video. Actually, this video you don't need to hear the audio for because there's no talking and it's all text. So I think I'll probably still use it.
Okay.
Let me see if you can hear this one. If you can see and hear this one.
I don't see anything and I don't hear anything.
Oh, perfect.
I see a black screen.
Man, oh, is that ever frustrating? Okay, yeah, I've used their video functions before, and it's always been hit or miss depending on a viewer's like technical setup. So I will not use that one, but I think I probably still will use the other one that I showed you. Uh,
Okay.
that's too bad. Oh well. Yeah, this is why we're switching from GoToWebinar at TechSoup Canada within the next month. All
Just
right.
wondering, are you guys
Yeah.
switching to a webinar platform that's like bilingual by any chance?
Mm, what do you mean by that?
So that like people who are, I guess, French speakers or so on, they could like access the webinar. It's not completely
Oh,
in English.
so oh, I see, I see. So like the webinar software would allow
Yes.
for French. Thanks so much. I'm not sure. So we are most likely going to switch to Zoom, but
Okay.
that's a really good point. As of right now, all of our webinars that we actually host are in English. So,
Right. Okay.
um, but that would be certainly an important part of accessibility for us.
Yeah. Oh, and in terms of accessibility for us with the languages, so I know this is only going to be in English, but we did offer to our members to have these slides in French. Are you able to send me the slides in like a PowerPoint format or however you created it so that we can put in French text?
Sure, yeah, sure. You can. It's in Google Slides,
Oh,
so
perfect. Okay.
if you're able to work in that, I can give you editor mode. I can give you editor access to that.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
Okay, great.
Okay. So when we start, I guess I'll just do like a hello and welcome to everyone, if
Yep,
that's okay.
that's fine.
And so I'll just talk about sort of how we came about doing this training opportunity for them. Pretty much, we sent out a survey, and people wanted more training on social media. And then I'm just going to invite people to send us feedback on the session and any other future training opportunities, and then I'll just leave it to you.
That's great. Sounds good.
And then at the very, very end, I guess after the questions and answers are done, and then I'll just say like a quick little thank you again.
Great. Yeah. And I will do my best to keep an eye on time, and I'm pretty sure that I'm right at the 45-minute-ish mark for the presentation part. But if I seem to be going over, or if anything, really feel free to interrupt me.
Sure.
Yeah. And everybody's going to be muted, so they'll be submitting questions through that questions pane. Are you able to see that?
I believe I am able to see it. Yes, I see a question and an asker section.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it's sent to all, send privately. So.
Yeah. So I'll tell people, they can submit their questions throughout the entire presentation there, and I will get to them at the end.
Okay, great. And are you able to see if I send them a reply?
Yeah, I will be able to see that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
But I probably, just because I'm going to be focused on the presentation part, I probably will not look. I'll probably have that the control panel collapsed.
Okay.
So yeah.
So I'll keep an eye in case there's any urgent questions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And in the beginning, if you're getting a bunch of technical questions like why can't I hear, what, blah, 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 I'm going to address that in this GoToWebinar logistics slide, like how to how to dial in basically. But if there's a ton of if a lot of people aren't able to access it, then do just interrupt me and we will kind of triage it there.
Perfect. And last question. Oh, right. So then if people are asking like specific questions, you're going to address them at the end. Did you want me to find those questions, or is that something that you wanted to do through the chat area?
So I'll the specific questions to ask at the end, I can just go through the question box at the end, and I can just sort of call out as many questions as I have time for. But if there's any that you really want me to get to, you can just say it, say it out loud.
Okay. Okay, great.
All right. Wonderful.
Right, well, this sounds good. So in about, I guess, 10 minutes, I'll call back in.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to start the webinar so that people can sign in and basically just see the welcome screen. But I won't start broadcasting until, I'll do that in maybe 5 minutes, and then I'll start broadcasting right at 1.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly.
All right, bye now. our presenter today, Benjamin.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you to everyone who's attending. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and to talk about social media. Before we begin, I just want to talk a little bit about the logistics on the technical side of things with GoToWebinar, our webinar platform for the day. So you have a panel on the right side of your screen, which is the GoToWebinar panel. You can use this to submit questions to us and to chat with us, with Kimberly and myself, throughout the presentation. You all will be on mute throughout the presentation, but we will have time for a formal Q&A session after the presentation. I will read your questions that you can submit throughout the entire presentation at that last 10-minute mark. So again, you can submit your questions at any time through the questions pane in your GoToWebinar panel. If you are having audio issues, do let us know through the chat or through the questions pane. Basically, the main recommendation is if you're connecting through internet, then if you can find an Ethernet cable, you will have a much better stable connection than you will with Wi-Fi. So if you can find an Ethernet cable, do plug in. And if you are dialing in, then dial in for audio, dial this number that's on the screen, and you'll be given an audio pin in your panel after joining that you can enter. You can use that GoToWebinar panel to adjust your volume. And yeah, hopefully the logistics, hopefully everything runs smoothly on the technical side of things. We will make the recording and the slides available to you after the webinar shortly. So before we begin, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we do at TechSoup Canada, and in the interest of expediency, I'm going to read off of a script, so please forgive me for that. Our mission is to help nonprofits use technology effectively, and we do this in two ways. The first is to make technology products more affordable through our technology donations program. We partner with tech companies such as Microsoft, Adobe, and Symantec, and we offer their products as either an outright donation or at a significant discount for charities, nonprofits, and libraries across Canada. Membership is free, and it gets you access to donated and discounted software from more than 30 tech companies. The second way we work with nonprofits to make technology an asset in advancing their missions is by providing free learning resources, mostly through our website. Sometimes we do external speaking engagements like this one. But basically, we have a membership base that's 30,000 nonprofits across the country. We have a lot of questions, and we try and create content around those questions and around the trends and the developments in the technology sector that can help organizations do what they do better. So you can sign up for our monthly newsletter on our website. You can read blogs written by us in-house, but also a panel of experts in various fields within the nonprofit technology area. You can follow us on social media, or you could just email us directly if there's a topic that you'd like to have some content around. We also do our own webinar series. We host one every month. So if you sign up for a newsletter, you'll get alerts on that as well. And just a really brief introduction to myself. My name is Ben. I manage communications at TechSoup Canada. I've been doing this kind of work for the past decade, sort of right at the cusp of when social media became a real tool for nonprofit communications. And I have to say, I've seen platforms come and go, and I've seen the evolution of Facebook into what it is now. And no matter what the platform, as long as you are understanding who your audience is, where they live online, how they engage with online content, and basically how you can enrich their lives through your communications, it doesn't really matter what platform you're using. That's sort of like the foundational truth to everything that I'll say today, and probably what you know already about communications in general, is that platforms are important for delivering a message, but really it's the connection that they enable you to create to your audience that's the real asset and the real work. Today, in this presentation, we are going to start sort of at the foundational understanding of social media, because so many organizations, I think, manage social media accounts without really knowing why. It's more of a sort of maybe a peer pressure thing or like I'm supposed to have a Facebook page and a Twitter account, but I don't really know why I'm doing it. And the issue there, as we'll see in some of the statistics in surveying the landscape, is that it leads to the content you create being sort of an afterthought, and then it doesn't really have the impact that it can. We'll also talk about examples of other nonprofit social media campaigns. There's some really creative approaches that organizations have taken in using social media to advance their missions. And then we'll talk sort of strategically, how do you create a strategy? How do you create a policy? How do you create a schedule? All of which fits into the reality of running an organization, which is we are pretty much all cash strapped. We are all doing a million things at once. So how do you work this into your operations in a way that is sustainable and not cumbersome and hopefully kind of fun? And then we'll close with some tips on curating great content online and creating it. And then we'll go into the Q&A session. So again, anytime you have a question, you can enter it into the questions panel. And I see some people are starting to do that already. I probably will not read these throughout the presentation. I'll wait until after the presentation to get to them. But I know that Kimberly is going to be monitoring them. All right, let's begin at the understanding social media. Let's get to sort of the why and the how of it. So I know many people I work with and encounter say, I'm already using social media. Why do I need to understand it? And I think that attitude is totally understandable, but you can sort of see it as a driver of these statistics that we're looking at right now. So how are nonprofits using social media right now? So the first thing to know in making sense of these statistics is that to be successful, to have like an actual return on investment on the time and resources that you're investing into your social media efforts, studies are showing that that magic number in terms of time devoted to your social media efforts, you want to be putting at least 2 hours per week per channel into your social media efforts. That means if you have a Facebook and a Twitter account, then putting 2 hours per week into each of those. For some people, that seems like very little. For some people, that seems totally impossible. But I think the attitude that's like, why do I need to understand it? You'll sort of see here reflected in these numbers. So, only, I'd say the vast majority, based on that 38%, are not spending even the 1 to 2 hours per week on social media. More than half are not measuring data, which is, again, understandable if you are sort of doing social media as an obligation or a chore. But if you're not measuring data, you really don't know if what you're doing is working. And if you're not measuring data, you don't really have the license to experiment and try new things and expand the conversation to include the audiences that you are currently reaching and are trying to reach. And so you see that if more than half of organizations are not measuring data, then there's not really the intention in place that needs to be there to create that ROI. And you can see that also in the nearly 70% of organizations that don't have a social media strategy. Again, these are like foundational things that are really important to put in place so that you can be successful in your social media. Again, everything we're going to talk about comes back down like, are you doing this intentionally? Are you doing this with authenticity? And are you doing this with your audience in mind? And so you really do need a plan and a strategy and a policy to make sure that you're always on that track. And we'll talk about that in the last part of the conversation. So clearly, nonprofits recognize the importance of social media. I think something like 92% of nonprofits, either in Canada or North America or in the United States, I forget exactly the source, 92% of nonprofits have a Facebook page, which makes sense. Facebook has 2.2 billion monthly active users. It's part of our daily reality as people of this country and of the earth now, like it or not. So it makes sense that a lot of nonprofit, that the vast majority will set up profiles on Facebook. But again, what you do with that and what you do with the knowledge that 70% of nonprofits are also on Twitter and on LinkedIn and all this stuff, what you do with that depends on having like a really solid strategy in place. because you'll see a lot of nonprofits on social media that basically just have these ghost accounts. Somebody set it up for them. They probably hired a college student as an intern one summer ago, and maybe they update, every 6 months or something. And that's an issue because not only are you missing an opportunity to connect with your audience, you're also damaging your credibility by putting a public-facing platform out there and not engaging with it. It doesn't look good. So now we're going to get into the platforms that are available. And there are many. We're going to focus sort of on the main ones. Obviously, the first and biggest that everybody associates, well, that many people would associate with social media are Facebook and YouTube. Now, I'll talk about YouTube in a second. You actually might not associate with that with a social media network, but it is an important asset as well. So Facebook, 2.2 billion monthly active users. That is a significant chunk of the world's population are active on Facebook. Largest demographic there tend to be women from the ages of 18 to 49. There's a lot of talk right now about younger people, about millennials and Generation Z leaving Facebook. The research I've done has shown that that's not true. Nobody's actually leaving Facebook for better or for worse. But it's the younger crowd is becoming more enthusiastic about other social media platforms, many of which we'll cover in the next slide. But they're still active on Facebook. They still have a presence there, and it's still part of their daily lives. Now, YouTube also has 1.5 billion monthly active users. Again, this is something that is part of our daily lives. Like I'm sure most of us have watched a YouTube video today, whether that's on the site or embedded in an email or on our phones. These are forces in our day-to-day lives. And YouTube's interesting because a lot of people just go to it to watch a video and then sign off. But people do use it as a social networking site. You do have to create an account in order to comment. And there are thriving audiences for many, many different organizations and influencers and people on YouTube, who are putting out consistent video content. It's obviously a very different media format than Facebook or other social media platforms, but there is a huge potential to tap into specifically the demographic of men 18 to 34 around the world. Obviously, they are not the only two social media platforms in the world. Instagram is a runner-up, but just barely. I mean, there are 800 million monthly active users on Instagram right now. Largest demographic is women, 18 to 49. Instagram, if you don't know, is a photo sharing platform. Twitter is a platform where you can send short updates and images and videos to your followers. 330 million monthly active users. Again, women are the largest demographic. And Reddit, you may or may not have heard of, is a social networking site where people can engage in conversations, share resources, share ideas, etc. And the largest demographic there is men from the ages of 18 to 29, so younger men there. And there are more, clearly. There's LinkedIn, there's Tumblr, there's Pinterest, there's even more than that. And on this particular slide, we haven't seen the sector invest so much in these platforms. And I think that may reflect where kind of a broader nonprofit audience lives online. Not to say that these aren't important platforms to consider, but certainly there's a reason why 92% of nonprofits have Facebook pages. So which channel should you use? There really is not one answer to this question. And obviously it is specific to your context. So in figuring out which channels you should be using, compared to which ones you are currently using, think about what's relevant for you and where you have sort of the in-house expertise. So you can kind of broadly group social media platforms into different kind of competitive advantages. So if you were seeking to raise awareness, then Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, these are really good platforms for that, for getting the word out, for getting eyes on your content, or not just eyes, for getting attention spent to your content. But if you were looking to educate, then a YouTube series might be even stronger than that, because a video format can do things that that written social media posts can't. Same with LinkedIn and same with Reddit. And if you're really looking to engage people and to influence the way they think about your organization and to draw them in a way that is evocative and works on an emotional level, then you can consider Instagram, Pinterest, and Snapchat. And again, you can use every platform to do anything you want, but this is sort of a good way to kind of start figuring out what are our overall organizational goals for communications? What's our mission as an organization? And where can we devote that 2 hours per week per channel? If nobody in your organization knows how to make videos, then YouTube is probably not where you want to be spending your time right now. So, kind of getting a sense of where your resources are and where your priorities are. It's a good starting point. And these additional considerations are important. Basically, everything boils down to that kind of key principle that I was talking before. Good social media is authentic. Good social media understands the audience. Good social media is a tool for inviting your audience to connect to your mission and to be part of your mission. So if it's not a fit, if all of a sudden everyone's on Snapchat and you're feeling the pressure to be on Snapchat, but you just don't understand it and your audience isn't living there and it seems fake or whatever, if it's not a fit, don't force it. Really, authenticity is the name of the game here. All right, we are going to go into some case studies. Before I do, Kimberly, is everything cool on audio and on the technical side of things? I'm just going to check in with you before I keep going. I'm not hearing Kimberly, but that might be because she's muted. But I'm not seeing too many questions in the question pane, so I'm going to go ahead and move ahead in our case studies. All right, this first one is close to home for me. The Center for Social Innovation is a co-working space, community and launchpad for people for changing the world. We at TechSoup Canada are a program of the Center for Social Innovation. So this one I know pretty well. So CSI has over 1,000 members. These are people who rent space, who work every day out of our co-working space, who host events with us, and who are part of sort of this broader CSI family. And what CSI wanted to do at this point was to increase the organic reach and engagement of their Facebook posts. What do I mean by organic reach? A few years ago, 5 years ago already, Facebook basically announced that up until that point, an organizational page or a company page or a business brand or whatever could go onto Facebook and they could post something through their page. And the chances of it appearing in what's called the news feed of their followers would be, the chances would be just as good as anybody else that was posting anything else. And Facebook said, that's really not what we're about. There's a very crowded marketplace here. People want to be using Facebook more to connect with their friends and family. So we're actually going to change the algorithm to prioritize content from friends and family to appear in your followers' news feeds. And that's what we mean by organic reach, like the ability for a post that you create to organically, without you paying to promote it, arrive in your followers' news feeds. And because of these changes, organic reach has plummeted. So there's a pie chart in that last article from Buffer that says basically if you have 100 followers, then every time you post something to your page, only 6 of those 100 followers will get that post delivered to their newsfeed. The other 94%, or the other 94 will not see it. So there are ways around this, and one of those is to pay for posts, and I'm sure that was not an accident that Facebook made it harder for brands to appear in people's news feeds without paying. Obviously, it was a huge market opportunity for them to bring in money. And there's certainly nothing wrong with paying for posts. I think if you have the resources to do that, for paying to promote your posts, what Facebook calls boosting posts, Twitter calls it promoted posts, it's a good option if you have the resources for it, and it's worth experimenting with. It's worth maybe running a campaign saying, we're going to devote $25 to seeing what this, how well can we target our target audience in this. But it's certainly not the only way. And if you only promote your posts, if you only boost your posts, it will quickly become very expensive. What CSI wanted to do was increase their organic reach. Again, that's not paying for posts. That's like, how do we get into people's news feeds organically? And so they did this cool thing where they took 10 of their members, of their member organizations, and said, okay, each of you gets a week to run our Facebook page. And during that week, you can promote whatever you want. You can talk about whatever you want, as long as it's appropriate and on brand. You can talk to us about your organizational work. You can promote, your media campaigns. You could lobby. You can engage people. And in doing that, because these members that are part of the CSI membership bring their own networks with them, they really were able to expand that kind of circle of friends and family exponentially. And people were interested in seeing this because this was an interesting thing too. This brought people into the conversation who had not been engaging with CSI on the same wavelength as that before. And the results really speak for themselves. So before the campaign, they were seeing a reach of about 6,000 people per post. And in the peak of the campaign, that number shot up to almost 100,000. So that's exponential growth. That's 175% increase. And it's, they did it without paying for posts. They did it in a way that sort of like pushed the boundaries of what the platform is designed for, in a way that was very playful, very fun, and very engaging, very compelling. All right, case study number 2 comes from the Crossroads Exchange, which is a shelter, a pantry, and a social service provider in Manhattan for people experiencing homelessness and hunger in New York. Now, I have a video associated with this, but when I tested it with Kimberly before the webinar started, she was not able to see it, so I can include it in the slide presentation when I send it out. We just won't be able to watch it as a group, which is a shame because it's quite compelling as well. Essentially, what Crossroads did was they hired a bunch of street artists to make these kind of ad hoc chalk drawings on the streets of New York, around trash cans, around the street, around grills, around all these different things on the street, which drew attention to the fact that people who are experiencing homelessness and hunger have to go to great lengths to nourish themselves and to find nutrition and to survive on the streets. And their point was like, not only do we want to raise awareness and do we want to shift public perception by putting this art where people are looking, they're looking at the ground or they're looking at a wall. And again, like sort of their messaging was like, we know you're looking at the ground to avoid facing that that person experiencing homelessness on the street. We know that you're trying to look away, but there really is no looking away from this very stark and inhumane reality that that we have created for people who are experiencing homelessness and hunger. So they wanted to shift public perception, and they wanted to also increase the number of volunteers that they had and the number of donations that they were receiving. So to do this, and again, this is captured in this video quite well that will be included in the slides after the presentation. They created this street art in public places, and they did a really strong job of sharing it across their multiple social media channels. They posted videos to YouTube, they posted pictures to Instagram, they tweeted about it. They had a hashtag in there, which I realize is not in my slides, it's missing from my slides. But because this was sort of like a great combination of low-tech chalk art that anybody could do and social media, like it made for very compelling social media content. And so what they started seeing was people around the world started taking chalk to the streets and doing similar street art and calling for an end to homelessness and hunger in Sydney, Australia, and in Tokyo, and all around the world, and sharing those results online as well. So it really did create an interesting kind of viral phenomenon that picked up a lot of media attention, that increased their post reach by 15%, increased their social media following by 18%. Those are significant numbers. But even more importantly than that, this was very mission aligned, and they were clear in their messaging. Like, if you want to be part of the solution, please donate, and please, give us money, volunteer with us, donate groceries, whether it's to us or to your local organization, combating hunger. And they saw a 63% increase in the number of donations they received, and a 50% increase in the amount of groceries that were getting donated to them too. So those are tangible results that help this organization advance its mission. It's not just how many retweets did we get on this, how many people saw us on Facebook. It's like, this is food coming in that's going to be feeding the beneficiaries of this organization. The next case study comes from the UK. This is from an organization called COPO. COPO exists to make the UK a place where disabled people have the same opportunities as everyone else. One of the major forces that prevents people with disabilities from having the same opportunities as everyone else is the ableist discrimination that many people with disabilities face on a day-to-day basis. And some of that is manifested in just the everyday awkwardness that able-bodied people feel or report feeling around people with disabilities. So what COPO did was they invited a TV presenter and a journalist named Alex Brooker, who was a person with disabilities, who is a very kind of vocal and public-facing person for the rights of people with disabilities. And they invited him to host what's called an Ask Me Anything on Reddit. I'm not sure if any of you have been part of an Ask Me Anything or an AMA on Reddit, but essentially it's an opportunity for a person, whether that person is a politician or a celebrity or a thought leader or a change maker, somebody that people are interested in asking questions to. They sit in front of the computer for an hour or two for what's called an AMA event, and Reddit users from around the world can ask them, whatever they want. They can ask them any questions. And there's sort of a internal kind of regulating mechanism where questions that are seen as irrelevant or offensive or stupid will get downvoted, meaning that they'll appear lower on the page. So the person answering the questions probably will not see them and not get to them. And questions that are seen as insightful or good or relevant will get upvoted, and those will get moved to the top of the page. So there's a greater chance of the person who's doing the AMA to answer them. So they hosted this. Alex Brooker hosted this. I really like his tagline there. He says, "I'm probably the 10th most famous disabled person in the UK." I think that humor and that humility is quite disarming and charming. But they hosted this campaign, this as part of their End the Awkward campaign. And it was, basically like an opportunity for Reddit users to ask their questions to this person who was totally willing to answer them, who's willing to step into that position of saying, like, sure, I will handle your awkward, possibly offensive, maybe annoying, whatever questions you have about life with disability, and I will answer them in a way that's, fair and honest and humorous. And so what they did was they were able to start this honest discussion about what it is to live with disability and what it is to face ableist discrimination. And it was, it was a nice success for them. It was 86 comments or 86 comments in one day. I think, there were 254 in total. 76% participants upvoted the AMA, which is basically they recommended it on Reddit. And I think it plugged in quite well into this End the Awkward campaign that they were doing. It was a nice use of Reddit's core offering as a platform for fostering honest conversations. Okay, next case study comes from LA, from the LA County Museum of the Arts. Now, Kimberly mentioned that about 30% of the CHOO COPO organizations are museums. So this is why I included this one. This is a museum with a great collection in LA that really was seeking to increase museum attendance. They wanted to foster an interest in art history, and they wanted to spread awareness of their work and of just art in general to a much younger audience than they were seeing. And so what they did was basically they have a full-time staff member whose one of their primary responsibilities is to go around taking pictures of artwork in the museum, or pieces in their collections, and then use Snapchat to send those pictures out, but caption them with things that are very specific pop culture references. So here, this painting is captioned, and I suppose I should know what this painting, who this painting is by, and what this is of. But this caption is "My loneliness is killing me," which is a classic Britney Spears reference. On this first page, these 3 snaps are, that's a Mean Girls reference. Stop trying to make fetch happen. Eyebrows on fleek and dad bod. Those are very, very specific kind of meme-based references to the social media conversations that were happening maybe 2 years ago. And it's been a huge success. I mean, this is what Snapchat is for. It's for sending out pictures that vanish, after you receive them. But it's playful, it's irreverent, it's funny, and it's certainly Snapchat as a platform which appeals to a much younger crowd. A lot of millennials and Generation Zs. This is what they expect from this platform, and so to see a museum doing it well has made the museum this sort of darling of Snapchat. And unfortunately, I couldn't find any numbers to say, oh, they have this, this increase in their number of followers or this spike in attendance or anything. But they have been generating a lot of media around this, and they did win a Webby. So a Webby is the Webby Awards are an award show that recognizes sort of excellence in social media and digital media. And so their simple Snapchat presence has garnered them a Webby. It's also garnered them very gushing responses on BuzzFeed and Huffington Post, which are 2 publications that are extremely relevant for reaching that younger demographic that's using Snapchat and that LACMA wants to bring into the museum. Our next case study is on the World Wildlife Foundation, and this is also a Snapchat case study. And so, in the interest of full disclosure, I downloaded Snapchat yesterday or the day before because I had never used it before. We don't use it at TechSoup Canada. I don't understand it. I'm too old for it, I feel. But in reading these 2 case studies, I was compelled to see what it's all about. And I include the WWF here to say not that everybody needs to sign up on Snapchat and start doing this, but I think this second example is also a really good example of kind of moving to more of a meta use of these platforms and saying here is the limitations imposed on us by this platform. We're actually going to use those as part of our messaging. And you'll see what I mean in just a second. So they launched World Wildlife Fund launched a Snapchat campaign called the #LastSelfie to raise awareness of the threat facing endangered species. So if you don't know, Snapchat, when you send a snap, what's called a snap, which is a post on Snapchat, it disappears after 10 seconds. And then it vanishes. It's not like keeping a Facebook, it's not like when you publish a Facebook post or a tweet or even a text message. Those snaps disappear. You don't have access to them afterwards. And so this fact of how Snapchat operates was used as a metaphor by the WWF to basically say look, snaps vanish, and so might these animals on the endangered species list because they are facing extinction. So don't let this be my last selfie. These were a series of photos that were snapped out by the WWF with this hashtag, and the goal was to get people to actually take screenshots on their phone when that snap came through and then post those to Twitter and say, oh my God, I was just barely able to capture this snap because it vanished, but I'm going to share it to Twitter because I was able to do that. And it's kind of this powerful message that it's not just these snaps that are vanishing. Obviously, something much more dire is happening, and it's the fact that animals are facing extinction. I do have a video for this, and I'm going to try showing it. It's very brief, so if you're not able to see it or hear it, there's no spoken text to it. The audio is just music. If you're not able to see it or hear it, just bear with us for about a minute and a half. I'm hoping that most of you can see it and hear it. Just give me 1 second to bring it up. Okay, here we go.
Sorry, if some of you can't see the video, Benjamin, can we get a copy of the video when we send out the slides and the recordings to everyone?
Absolutely. Yeah, that'll be included.
Perfect.
Let me just share my screen again. Okay, share my screen. Okay, Kim, can you see my screen again?
I can, yes.
Okay, great. So this Snapchat campaign, this last selfie campaign, which I also encourage people to share the snaps on Twitter. The message being, and working on a very emotional wavelength is, if we don't take action in real life, these species will disappear for real. The campaign was a big success. More than 40,000 people tweeted this last selfie thing. So that means that many more received those snaps. And in just 3 days, the WWF was able to reach its monthly fundraising target. So clearly this resonated on a very deep level with a lot of people. So looking back on these campaigns that I just presented on, what do these have in common? The first thing and the most important thing is that there's a tangible challenge at the heart of each of these, and there's goals around it. It's not there. Certainly in social media, there is plenty of room to just experiment and play. But these were specific campaigns that had goals that were tied not only to social media metrics, but also to achieving certain things within the mission. Whether that was drawing in donations, encouraging people to volunteer or show up to a museum, or to take other social action. Each of these campaigns also really shows a deep reflects a deep understanding of the audience that the campaign is targeting, and how that audience uses social media. And beyond that, like especially in that last example, it shows an awareness of what social media like how social media platforms, how distinct social media platforms can be used in and of themselves as a platform, as a medium, to convey a deep message about a social cause. And each of these organizations chose the right tool for this message, to deliver this message. All right, quick pulse check. If you can, using the raise your hand, the hand raising function in your social media, in your GoToWebinar panel. How many of us have staff working on social media full time? If you can raise your digital hands. I see 1, 2, okay, 2, 3, full time. Fantastic. Okay, that's 3 out of 7. That's it's maybe 2 more than I anticipated in that. And I would say that's not common. That is a high number, and it's certainly not common to have staff working on social media full time, especially in the nonprofit sector where resources are all stretched so thin. To be successful, you don't need a full-time social media staff person. Obviously, if you can get that, it will really improve the level of engagement that you'll see on social media. But really what's important is to create a sustainable social media plan. And to do this, you need to start with the social media strategy. So you got to start on this high level. And the high level is like, what is our mission? What is our mission in the organization? What are we trying to do? And what are our goals around how we communicate that mission? Are we trying to advance a political cause? Are we trying to preserve historic memories? Are we trying to draw in fundraising dollars? Are we trying to create partnerships? Get integrated into the educational system? Like all of these are going to be context specific to your organization. And you will likely have done some sort of communication strategizing um, outside of social media and maybe within social media for those organizations that have done this. But basically, what you want to do is say what are our goals and what social media channels might we use in order to achieve those? And there's a good resource here that you'll be able to click through when you have the slides. A social media strategy template. Something very simple. How do we create a set of goals that is based on engaging our audience and inviting them to become part of our mission in a real way? And what could we use for a social media channel to do that best? So as you write that social media strategy, you'll also want to create a social media policy. And the starting point here is to understand what your brand persona is. Like your brand persona is, how do you want to be perceived by your audience and by the world at large? For us at TechSoup, we want to be seen as knowledgeable, approachable, authentic, and fun. We're distributing nonprofit technology. The stakes are not life and death. We don't need to be playing on people's emotions and making them cry all the time. We can throw in a lot of Star Trek references because that's where a lot of our team's interest is and a lot of our audience's interest is. So we can be playful and combine that with really providing a lot of useful information for our followers. With that policy, you also want to plan for different scenarios. So how will you respond to the interactions you get on social media? Now, hopefully you've all only ever received glowing recommendations on social media, but it can be a place where people are uninhibited in their criticism, and you need to know how you'll handle both of those things. So if you set up a Twitter page and you find yourself in sort of a brand crisis, you don't want to be figuring this out as you go. You want to have a policy in place so that if and when you receive that negative criticism, you have a good idea of how you want to respond to it, and you just follow the policy. And same with positive feedback too. You want to know how best to promote that, how best to share that. Are you going to retweet that? Are you going to favorite that? Are you going to incorporate it into your newsletter? Are you going to respond to every single positive feedback you get? Again, having that policy in place and tying it into a strategy really will help you run smoothly, like your social media efforts run smoothly. So you're not having to figure stuff out on the fly. And then you need to set a schedule. And this schedule needs to, it needs to match up to the campaigns you're running, to the events you're trying to promote. It also needs to match up to your organizational capacities. So if you have someone working on social media full time, you're going to have a different schedule probably than if you have just a volunteer who's in 1 day a week or something like that. But basically, at TechSoup Canada, our basic scheduling policy is we want to tweet 3 times a day. We want to post to Facebook twice a week. And to figure out what content goes where, we'll sort of see what webinar we're hosting that month, what the theme of that webinar is, or if it's if there's going to be a holiday that particular month, can we theme our social media posts around that, or if there's a campaign we're promoting or something like that. But basically, having a schedule in place really does take a lot of the pressure off you to create content on the fly. And it doesn't mean that you schedule 100% of your posts. It could mean that you use a tool like Buffer or Hootsuite or any number of scheduling tools to schedule, I don't know, 50% of your posts, 75% of your posts, and then the remainder of them you are doing on the day of, or you're doing through responses to other people, or you're retweeting or sharing content from other people that comes through on that particular day that you find relevant and compelling. So you've set up a strategy, a policy, a schedule, and then a really key component of finding social media success is in how you are measuring and evaluating your efforts. And I see now that I have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to move somewhat quickly through this. A good framework for understanding how to measure and evaluate is this see, say, do framework. So not only do you want people to see your posts, your social media efforts, not only do you want them to be delivered in front of your audience, you want them to engage with it. You want them to speak to it, retweet it, to respond to it. And not only those two things, you also want them to do something. You want them to do something to advance your mission. That might be donating to you. That might be attending an event. That might be signing up as a volunteer. That might be becoming a brand ambassador, something like that. But the key thing to realize about this framework is there are a lot of metrics out there, and grouping them into see, say, / feel, and do is an important step because it allows you to see the interconnections between these metrics. So the C column doesn't tell you anything when it stands on alone. Like if 100 million people see the tweet you share, but they don't end up doing anything about it, they just see it and it just kind of registers in their attention span for 5 seconds, and then they don't think about it afterwards, then you haven't achieved anything. So you need to be looking at what impact each of these different elements has on the other and how they all tie back to your mission. There's a great resource linked to here around understanding this framework, and it'll be part of the slides. And there are lots of tools for measurement, for impact measurement. Facebook provides you insights. Twitter provides you analytics. Pretty much every suite or every platform will have some sort of suite of native analytics, and those are very useful. But then you can also use tools like Hootsuite and Buffer and Bitly and all these other tools for for tracking what kind of engagement you're seeing online. All right, a very quick tip for creating and curating great content. It's not all about you. So if you just promote yourself with every post, you are going to bore people, you're going to alienate people, you're missing an opportunity to create conversation. Engage in other people's conversations. Jump in on conversations that are happening in ways that are, respectful and relevant and on point. Be timely with your responses and focus on stories, because ultimately every social media platform is really a storytelling tool. And if you can figure out ways to convey those very human emotional stories that are at the core of your organization, and use social media just as a tool for telling those stories, then you will inherently be creating compelling content. And if you can get people to engage with it, then it really will enrich their lives. And if you're really short on time, then just focus on one channel and get really, really good at delivering really consistent content through it. And then this final comment is basically just like publish great content. Focus more on enriching people's lives than anything else, and everything else will fall into place. Because if you're doing that, then people will come to you, and that will help advance your mission in that way. Okay, now we have time for question and answers. So Kimberly, I will open it up to you, but I can also just go through the questions myself.
Great. I think we have a few questions here, so I'll just read one out.
Sure.
Is it better to share content or recreate a new post with that content?
Better to share I'm going to read this as, is it better to share somebody else's content? Like basically if somebody says something that you find interesting, retweet it, or should you create an original post that has that content within it? I think
I'm going to read that the same way.
Yeah, I think both are totally fine. I'd say you want to do more of the latter than the former. So you want to be putting more of your own original content out there, while obviously giving credit to the person that the original, whatever you're repurposing, giving credit to the creator of that. But it's certainly good to also retweet people. It goes a long way in establishing connections and expanding your following.
Okay, great. Next question. Should there be more than one person working on social media, and how should the tasks be divided between them? So like data collection or posting or so on.
I think that's specific to your organization based on not only how many people do you have working with you and how many people have the capacity to do this kind of work, but also like where is the in-house knowledge. So if one person has the time and the expertise to do this, then it certainly can live in one person's responsibility. But if that person needs support, then I think divvying up those tasks in a way that's very clear and getting people, anybody who's involved, any relevant training or expertise development is a really worthwhile investment of time and resources.
Okay, great. So I guess this one's for the page takeovers that you were talking about for the case study, case study 1. Do you give members or do you give the people the admin access for the page takeovers, or do they just send the content to you?
That's a good question. I'm actually not sure. That case study predated my time at CSI, so that I know the results of it, but I don't know the logistics of it. I would definitely think that if you are going to give people external to your organization administrative rights to your Facebook page, you would want to have them sign something contractually to make sure that you could sort of hedge against any liability. And you would want to change your password to Facebook or whatever platform you're using every time the administrative rights changed hands.
Okay. Other than Reddit, are there any other platforms that work well with the Ask Me Anything campaigns?
Reddit is the one that's known for it. Reddit has I think an r/AMA subreddit. But you could certainly attempt it, on Twitter. I think I've even seen something similar sort of on Facebook Live. I would say that, if maybe the logic behind this question is, if none of the people we want to reach are on Reddit, should we be using Reddit? And no, then you definitely would not want to force it and try and get people to use Reddit if that's not where your target audience lives. And you could certainly attempt it on Twitter, I think, or on Facebook, like with the right amount of promotion and saying like, hey, from 12 to 1, we're going to have this person sitting on Twitter. So use this hashtag and tweet to us at that point, treating it like a tweet chat. I'm sure you could be successful in that too.
Great. And I just see one last question. It says here, do you have any tips for bilingual content? What are some best practices for writing bilingual posts, i.e. 2 separate posts or both in one method?
Right. This was actually a question that came through before the presentation, and I think it's a really interesting question. I would say that as just like a guiding principle, if the more targeted you can be in speaking to your audience, the better. So if you have a French audience and you have an English audience, and you have the capacity to create both French and English posts, I would do that because I think it allows for sort of those posts to live in an ecosystem more independently and autonomously. So that your French post could get retweeted and commented on by French followers and sort of French users of that social media platform, and your English platform could do the same. That being said, I don't think there's any issue in putting out content that is bilingual within the same post. I don't, I can't say one way or the other which is better. So my recommendation would be try it both ways and then just track the data and see what you get in terms of impressions and engagements and likes and retweets and everything. And don't hesitate for anything that you want to try to ask your followers. Say, which do you prefer? We're looking to make this the best experience for you, and we want to speak most directly to you. So so tell us what you prefer. So it depends on them, it depends on the data, and it depends on your in-house capacity.
Great. So if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to email me, or you can email Benjamin here on his email. So thank you again, Benjamin, for all this great information on how to engage more people on social media. Just a reminder, a recorded version of this webinar and the slides will be sent to you shortly after the webinar has completed. So thank you all for joining us today, and we appreciate you being here. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks so much, everybody. It's been a real pleasure. Please don't hesitate to contact me.